in a world of sand, where that sand just clumps right up intermittently in large hills. A thing the locals call a sand dune. Now those people, they gave their world a name, and they called it Dune. They called the planet Dune because of all the dunes. And thus the planet Dune was born, a land of intrigue and a land of magic, and also a lot of sand. Now there was actually a book series named after this planet, and let me tell you, it's got it all. Giant worms, galactic witches, small worms, guild navigators, laser guns, and even a guy that turns himself into a worm. There are 9 books in the original Frank Herbert series. And for adaptations, there's the 1984 Dune movie directed by David Lynch, the Sci-Fi Channel's original miniseries for a couple of the books, and also the more recent Dune Part 1 and Part 2 films. Today I'm just going to focus on the last one, Dune Part 2, and how it falls short of a great film, and how it distorts the original message in a few important ways.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
My short and easy opinion on the film is that it was a pretty good experience. It has a lot going for it. Good music, good special effects, good camera work, just a darn good spectacle. It succeeds as a great sci-fi tragedy, but ultimately a chopped down, simplified, and slightly distorted version of the original. So we're going to focus on the characters of Paul, Chani, Jessica, and Alia, and how their characters differ from the images that we find in the novel, and especially why those changes might not have been for the best. Now, the first problem with Dune is a topic that I'm somewhat apprehensive to talk about, just for how odd it is to introduce. I'm talking about the character, or the lack of character, Alia, also known as Alia of the Knife, who happens to be a 4-year-old demon witch child with the embedded memories of thousands of older demon witches. I just find it a bit awkward and off-putting to discuss the legitimate institutional and political critiques that come along with a ninja-flipping demon witch child with X-Men mind powers. So Alia is the daughter of Jessica and the sister of Paul. It is this little baby right here, but we never get to see her fully realized. We have a cameo by Anya Taylor-Joy as Alia, which feels a bit forced and inconsequential. The unborn child can apparently speak to Jessica.
What is happening, Mother?
Your brother attacks the great houses.
But not much Alia. No demon child running around horrifying the local Fremen people. When they first talked about Alia being in the movie, I was kind of excited and curious. When the first trailer dropped and this blurry shot of someone walking in front of a huge sandworm, a lot of people, including myself, thought this might be Alia, but nope. Just an unborn baby and a So Hot Right Now cameo by Anya Taylor-Joy. So where did Alia go? Compared to the original story, there's a large gap of time that's been cut out. And the big cut, the part that's missing, happens right after we have the Water of Life ceremony. But in the novel, the ceremony is not some frightening, weirdly coercive shakedown. It's actually a giant party. It's not a small private gathering of a few women with the atmosphere of a cult initiation. It's actually done in front of thousands of Fremen. It's a big old celebration of life and death. Now, Jessica undergoes the ceremony, and she takes on the soul and memories of the older Reverend Mother. The old Reverend Mother also has the memories of the women who came before her. It's like a Maristroika doll of personality and recall, but the unborn Alia, sitting right in her mother's belly, also gets one-shotted by the ancient memories. It's a very big ruh-roh. So the ceremony finishes up, and after Jessica drinks the blue stuff, the leftovers is made safe. It's made safe, passed around, and everyone gets down to a little hanky-panky. A big matrix cave rave snuggle pile. And it's in this snuggle pile that Paul and Chani find each other. They have a nice moment of intoxicated intimacy, and then we just take a big jump forward a few years. And that's where Alia is. Also, Paul and Chani have a child of their own at that time, which ends up dying because of the Harkonnen raids. I think it would happen about right here. This death was one of the major push and pull factors that led to Paul seizing power. But hey, that was also cut for simplicity and reasons of convenience. In the book, Alia is what they call a preborn, a child that comes out pre-packaged with the mind, awareness, and memories of an adult. She also has this incredible mental game, being the daughter of a Bene Gesserit, but she doesn't have any of the appropriate mental or physical training. She is a very powerful and dangerous 4-year-old with no personal experience or wisdom. She's a horrifying little thing. There was actually an episode of The Twilight Zone that Alia reminds me of, where a bratty child is essentially God, has like godlike powers, and the child horrifies people with his tantrums and lack of moral understanding. Now, Alia doesn't have godlike powers, but you kind of get the picture of how reckless or dangerous that might be. For her role in the story, it is Alia, after all, that ends up killing the Baron. She slips a poison needle into his arm and then just runs off to go stab other soldiers. A bratty little 4-year-old just scampers out of the room to go assassinate more people. So there is a reason why Alia's role is important. If you zoom out on the story, a lot of it, or at least a good portion of the story, is about control. There are a lot of players trying their best to get some kind of control in the game, whether it's financial, political, military, or even self-control. On an individual level, Paul has visions of the future, and with that vision, he's trying to take control of its path.
I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
He's trying to control the future, and that ends very badly. The Bene Gesserit, with their elaborate bloodlines, they're attempting to control the future generations of mankind, and they end up creating with their system both Paul and Alia. Paul has all the power that they wanted to create, but they have absolutely no control over him. And Alia, a child that they themselves call an abomination. They absolutely played with fire. She's a 3 feet tall Frankenstein's monster who embodies all the psychological and genetic horrors of the Bene Gesserit. The film is just missing that institutional critique, and it just folds all of it into the character of Paul. Without Alia, you get no horrifying consequences to Jessica's actions, and her actions were never sinister to begin with. I'll talk about that next. Without Alia, you get nothing physical, nothing manifested showing us the consequences of the Bene Gesserit or of Jessica. Alia got sidelined. Maybe she'll pop up in part 3, but I have no idea how they're gonna fit her in, as she doesn't really have much to do in Dune Messiah.
My gift to you. I ought to drown you in that tub. Don't be hasty.
When we talk about roles, we have yet another big switcheroo going on here. And maybe the biggest switcheroo of them all with the Lady Jessica. That's Paul's mother. In Dune Part 2, Jessica, in very stark contrast to the first movie, she transforms into an overtly manipulative and sinister figure. It's not exactly clear why this happened, but right after drinking the water of life, she becomes the zealous architect of her son's rise to power, and actively pushes him to embrace his messianic role. The movie directly shows us Jessica leading Paul down the path to doomsday. So after drinking the water of life, She just decides that she needs to brainwash the masses and help her son take over the galaxy. This was very jarring to me, especially as someone who's read the book. She is visibly emotional and agitated. She's cold and crass. She's vain and menacing. So when you put these things together, Jessica's arc in the story is going from a controlled, guilt-ridden, and very concerned mother working through constant existential threats, all the way to this trope of some kind of overreaching maternal ambition. She's trying to make her child the king of everything. So while it is nice that Jessica gets a bigger, more prominent role in the story, her character in the film stands in almost complete contrast to Herbert's novel. And that was strange to watch. And I'm assuming that that's true for anyone else that's read through the book. I was watching the movie, and right after the Water of Life ceremony, Jessica says this. And it was right here that I was thinking, that's not right. Now here's why this is a problem. You have to think of someone's part to play in the bigger story. And the part that Lady Jessica needs to play was a little bit complex. First off, Jessica holds up a very large mirror to the institution of the Bene Gesserit, an institution that has grand aspirations of control and manipulation. They want to guide humanity in a direction that they best see fit. They have plans and plans within plans, and there's also this big old plan to bring about the Ubermensch, the so-called Kwisatz Haderach. The Bene Gesserit are in a big team, and they have stronger mental abilities than the average person, and they're trying to create someone with abilities that go far beyond their own. Their plan is to make a Superman and then hope that the Superman is always on their side. That does sound a little risky. The Bene Gesserit also spread religious ideas on Arrakis long before Paul and Jessica arrive. And Jessica is very thankful for this. They do play into the Fremen's religion and superstitions, and it helps Paul and Jessica not get killed out in the open desert. But that seeding of ideas, that kind of propaganda, means that all the locals, they think that Paul is the Messiah, and that leads them to doing a holy war across the galaxy, and I don't think that was part of the Bene Gesserit's plan. The next role that Jessica has is to highlight how far Paul has gone off. Jessica wanted a son. She also thought maybe she could make a superhuman son. She did her best to train him to a very high degree of mental and emotional maturity, but as he starts to go off the deep end, she truly doesn't know what to do. So she's there, as well as Chani, to show the awkward position that many people are in with Paul's rise to power. She was one of the parts that created Paul, and she doesn't know what to do about it. All in all, she's a very conflicted mother, and she has loyalties to so many people, to the Duke Leto, to her son, the Bene Gesserit, to her own consciousness. She's a complex character, and she's always having this nice little human struggle, but in a reserved and nuanced manner. She isn't a sinister villain. She doesn't look at the camera and put on this kind of Joker smirk. I would really like to know why the writers went in this direction. Are they trying to highlight some kind of white colonialism or native oppression? It's a very weird choice, and someone has some explaining to do. Jessica's not this kind of psychotic villain. She's someone who feels so much guilt for the situation they've gotten themselves into. She has no idea what to do with Paul. Her job description is that she's a concubine. She's had to work her way up from that all the way into a well-respected advisor to Duke Leto, and she also then goes on to advise Paul. She's having to navigate immensely complicated and difficult political situations. I don't want to sound corny, but her character in the book is actually trying to do the best that she can. She's a very pragmatic and honest person. Why did they do this? Now we're going to move on to everyone's favorite super hot star, an actress who only goes by one name for some reason. It's the one and only Zendaya. Her actual name is Zendaya Coleman, but we can leave out the ordinary part and pull a weird cultural exception for her. Zendaya plays a brooding, young and rebellious, politically aware Fremen named Chani, who slowly falls in love with Paul, but as the movie goes on, grows increasingly alienated from him, and ultimately suffers a kind of tragic betrayal, condensing the disappointment of Paul's corruption into a single person. When it comes to the religious atmosphere of her people, Chani is a non-believer, a based atheist. She's deeply skeptical of the prophecies that surround Paul. She's very aware of the meddling and subtle influence of the Bene Gesserit, but like so many things here, the book's Chani is extremely not like Zendaya. Chani is not a deeply skeptical loner within an overbearing and fundamentalist culture. On one hand, she's a loyal, devoted Fremen, a well-respected woman among her people, a fierce warrior, and on the other, a real political advisor to Paul, a true defender of Paul. Chani is a character of complex intimacy. Okay, we're talking about characters and the role that they serve within a large story. Let's give a different example. Maybe think of the character of Samwise Gamgee. His role is to be the helpful, kind-hearted motivation to keep the ring moving forward. And he is such a kind-hearted motivation that he's actually a better person than Frodo. The book expresses this, and the film also directly expresses this. Back in the Dune world, Chani's role in the narrative is complicated. I can explain it, but it does have a few parts. So first off, she's what you might call a cultural liaison. She's a bridge to the Fremen people. Chani is a nice rooting of the Fremen. So within a story about Paul, Chani is a nice connection of the Fremen and their interests to Paul. Secondly, Chani is the end result of years and years of myth-making. She's devoted to Paul and yet is kind of horrified and confused by what he might be. She also does not understand Paul's situation. She highlights how bizarre being next to a Superman it really is. Paul can see the future. He knows how every conversation will go, and he's actually unable to have a spontaneous conversation even with the closest person to him. Now, you might argue that the changes to the character are an improvement that grants Chani more agency or somehow makes her a more dynamic character, but you have to contend with the fact that this fundamentally alters her tragic nature, and it also completely shifts the moral conflict within the story. By moral conflict, I mean who do we support and who do we oppose? Sometimes that's a very difficult question. I was working through the Song of Ice and Fire series, and you have to think, is Jaime Lannister good or evil? That's a very difficult question. He does very good things and he does very bad things, all of which should completely redeem him or completely condemn him. With Chani, you have to understand the original material and the perspective of the reader. As you work your way through the book, you watch step by step Paul's descent into power. The choices that he makes, his motivations, his mistakes that lead or sometimes force him into a terrible situation. The book's audience is able to see the twisted web of confusion that ends up corrupting Paul. It's very complicated. You don't really finish the book liking Paul or thinking he's a great guy, but you certainly don't finish the book thinking he's some sort of monster. He's certainly not the hero of many other sci-fi stories, but he's certainly not some sort of cartoony villain. Was he good or evil? Well, you have to actually think about that question a lot, and that's what makes him an interesting character. With Dune Part 2, we get a lot less time with Paul. No inner monologues dealing with his rise of power and infamy. No political conflict that he has to somehow navigate. And a lot less for the audience to feel disappointed in. And the disappointment is placed on Chani. We know we should be disappointed in Paul because Chani spells it out for us. Paul does something complex, risky, or questionable, and every time he does, we do an office gym face and we cut to Chani to let us know that what just happened was a bad thing. For example, Stilgar is a brainwashed fanatic, and that's made clear because Chani, in stark contrast, is not a brainwashed fanatic. In fact, it's made entirely clear that her people got fooled into a cult of personality because Chani is essentially the only one brave enough to stand up and shout that the Emperor has no clothes. The audience has a lot less thinking to do because Chani just kind of does it for them. In actuality, the book's version of Chani is a complex character. She's not a modern trope of an empowered woman, some noble protest of institutions. She's actually a well-respected member of her society. She does not despise Jessica. They initially have somewhat of an awkward relationship because Jessica, basically the queen, thinks that her son, the prince, married some random commoner. So you can see the clash of worlds. But both of them, they slowly realize that they just want what is best for Paul. Chani is not constantly disappointed in Paul and feeling betrayed by his actions. She's actually completely devoted to him. She's not some rebellious teen. Chani was the daughter of Liet Kynes, the eco-visionary of all Fremen. Kynes was the person who convinced the Fremen that they could indeed change the world and make it green. When you see those giant stores of water underground that the Fremen are keeping safe, that was because of Chani's father. She absolutely believes in the Fremen's uprising, but we cut out Liet Kynes' story because we needed some blatant tokenism to replace more complex ideas. Chani feels like she's battling or fighting over the main character position. They even switched Zendaya's face into Paul's vision. The actual Chani happened to be a powerful and respected figure in her own culture, who, like many other people, is then caught in a very difficult political situation, something that you might call a thing that grown-ups have to deal with. You took the subtlety and complexity of the original role and you replaced it with some modern archetype of cliche protest, and it was obnoxious to see. The motivations for this change are very suspect. You have a massive star and you don't want her to rely on someone. You want her to be more independent and brave. It just changes so much of the original story, and it's very strange and it's very uncomfortable. The reason I focused on the three ladies to start this off is because those are the largest and most impactful changes to the story. The evil white colonizer mother, the complete absence of Alia, and then the noble and brave protester. For the character of Paul, he just feels simplified and one-dimensional. Why does he want to gain power? What's his motivation? Does he want to set things right for his father? Does he want to punish the other houses? Maybe he's just being led around by his suddenly manipulative mother. Does he actually want to lead the uprising of the noble Fremen people? What is he struggling for? We just kind of externalize his struggle We place his motivations on other characters. You have a mother that's pushing their son to tyrannical greatness. You have an old mentor who's capitalizing on military power for revenge. And you have a religious zealot that believes in everything Paul does. Maybe the movie is making Paul out to be a sympathetic victim of destiny, but then why do we need to be angry about it? The Paul in the books is more of a tyrant in the making, a religious image that got way out of his hands. Now, Paul can see the future, but the book also suggests that Paul might be trapped by his prescience. He can see the future, he can see the terrible things that will happen, but that just locks him into the next step towards that future. He knows what he will do, and that ironically becomes the only thing that he can do. The book also suggests that his prescience is a kind of prison of his own desire, implying that Paul is making small, conscious choices to slowly gain power. Throughout the book, Paul is thinking to himself about his current predicament. The fact that everyone looks at him like a savior. The fact that he has an incredible ability to see into the past and the future. He weirdly understands that if he were to just end his own life, he would still become a martyr and an image for the coming jihad. He would prevent nothing. And finally, he just starts to lean into the idea of seizing power. We have a very complex and difficult to judge character with Paul, and in the movie, he just feels thin and distant. He doesn't really feel like the main character that we got in the book. He really doesn't feel the same. It's very hard to pinpoint, but something's off. Some people were disappointed that I felt like the first movie got some things wrong, angry that I didn't just enjoy the movie and not put an unfair expectation of living up to the book. I thought the first movie was fine. I think that if you take the movies by themselves, they're actually pretty good. The problem comes in when you have read the books, and so much of it seems changed and shifted, and you got huge narrative shifts or moral shifts that seem weirdly unnecessary. And you might say, well, just think of it like a movie, don't compare it to the book. Okay, but the director himself says that he's a lifelong Dune fan.
I read the book 40 years ago, fell in love with it. Totalitarian dreamer, arrogant, pretentious.
And the movie that he ended up making seems like a weirdly inauthentic version of the story. If you want me to nitpick the movie, I can do that.
As Emperor Dr. Kynes, I can make a paradise of Arrakis with a wave of my hand.
They're not human, they're brutal. Brutal.
Let him try.
We never got to see the Spacing Guild. They were here in the sci-fi show and they were awesome.
The guild does not take your orders.
But they didn't show up anywhere. Again, I don't want to drag the new movies through the dirt. They are still pretty good in their own right. And I'm interested to see how they wrap everything up with part 3, and I will be absolutely ready to critique that one as well. I think it's just a dishonest, inauthentic way to view media, is just saying epic to everything.
It feels so epic and it feels so intense.
So much more epic.
The single greatest science fiction epic movie achievement of all time.
Epic. Absolutely epic.
It's epic. Truly epic.
More epic for part 2.
Epic.
Epic.
Epic in every way.
Fucking epic.
Holy fuck, it was
awesome.
epic.
Any science fiction production that makes it to TV or movies, and the only thing you can say is epic. Like, you're afraid to have any standards because you've attached your personality to this so much. But I digress. If you've made it this far, what's a good book to read next? Are there any other works that you'd like for me to discuss? Just let me know below. Alright, thanks for watching.